Thank you for being here, for joining us for the financial literacy workshop. If everyone can just please put their email in the chat, that way we can keep attendance that way. Jevon is the rep from CalCoast Credit Union, and he will be doing the workshop.
Well, thank you so much, Sophia. I appreciate it. And thank you everyone for being on the call and having me here. Talk to you a little bit about myself. So my name is Jevon Boyer, and I teach financial literacy for CalCoast. I absolutely love my job, and I get to have the pleasure of working with individuals and families and help them with their financial planning. And of course, my phone's ringing at the same time, so let me just put that on silent. Sorry about that. All right, so let's make sure everybody's chat is working. Looks like we only got about 13 people on the call. Let's go ahead and just type in the chat what you had for breakfast this morning. Oh, bone broth, not feeling well. Sausage biscuit, chocolate toast. Awesome. Yogurt. Pretty healthy. All right, good. I just wanted to make sure everybody's chat was working so that way you can stop me during the middle of the presentation, ask questions. Again, this is a perfect size group, about a dozen of us on the call. That way it's not too big and everybody can, like I said, stop the meeting and just say, hey, I've got a question about this. But again, like I said, I work with young families. I help them create their budgets. I help them understand their credit. But all too often, I meet with young families who want to move forward their lives. They want to buy a car or a home for their growing families. But the loans they took out during their college years are holding them back. So much, in fact, that in a recent poll, almost half the graduates who participated in this poll said that their degrees were actually not even worth the debt that they created. So I want you to notice something. And I'm not trying to be all doom and gloom, but notice they did not say they regretted going to school, but they regret getting themselves into debt. For most people, college is a powerful goal that can have a tremendous impact on your life. But the process of getting into school and paying for it is more confusing than ever. And most parents and students I talk to don't even know where to start. So you guys actually have your foot in the door. You're already attending. You're already there. So what can we do better? What can I do to help you? So I recently attended the San Diego State Explorers Day, where you get all kinds of booths set up to display different activities and the resources that the campus has to offer. Actually, California Coast has a branch on the in the San Diego State campus. And we were set up in the booth right next to the financial aid office. And the questions I heard from parents all day long painted a very clear picture that the parents or the students weren't ready for what they're about to walk into. And I was no different. I spent my entire high school career focusing on working, having fun with friends, and graduating rather than what I was going to do on after high school. Actually, the first conversation I can remember having with my parents about college was the summer after I graduated, and I asked them if I could borrow $200 to enroll at the local community college. And my parents looked back at me and said, well, and save up and go next semester. So of course I was disappointed, angry. I felt my parents had failed me. And many of you may even agree or have been in similar situations or in similar situations. Now, of course, parents were involved in my life and wanted the best for me, but I'm one of 6 kids. So if I wanted to go to school, I'd have to figure it out on my own. No one ever sits a student down and says, if you want to go to that school, this is what you need to do. So that's why I'm here today. I want you guys to know what's coming. Like I said, you guys are already in school. You started the process. And before moving forward, I want you to give you guys as many options as possible. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So the main areas we're going to focus on today are the financial aid options and repayment strategies. So before we begin, I'd like to you guys consider one thing, and this is big. If you can master the first one, the financial aid options, you may never really have to worry about the repayment strategies, spending years or decades putting your life on hold, putting your dreams on hold to figure out how to repay debt you got yourself into. And the sad truth is, student loan debt is just accepted as normal in today's culture. So let me ask you guys a question. I'm gonna put this in the chat. Do you guys believe that you will need to borrow money to continue going to school? I just kind of want to know your thoughts on it. If you want to raise their hand and give me some thoughts on that. Ruben says FAFSA. I like that. Programs to help you guys pay for it. Awesome. No, I can't take out a loan. All right. So, like, no one tells students that it's actually possible to get through school with very little or no debt. So, like I said, all day long at that Explorers Fair, I had parents asking me where the student loan booth was. That was the first thing I went to. And again, I tell you, every single day I work with people in their 20s and 30s and 40s who are starting families, want to buy a home. They need more space for their growing families, or they want to buy a home because they don't want to continue renting forever. But too late, they realize that even though they work hard and they have a good paying job, they still may not qualify for a home or a new car because of their student loan debt. But it can be done. So I actually never took out any student loan debt. I worked and attended school when I saved up enough money. And it took me longer to get through. But the interesting thing was, I was the first of my friends to buy a home. All my other friends were saying they couldn't buy a home because of all the money they borrowed during their college years. So if I could go back again, here's how I would do it. And this is the order I would attack it. So again, like I said, you guys are pretty much all in school right now. If you are planning on moving forward and wondering how you're going to pay for school, the first thing I would do is learn everything I could about the different types of financial aid that's available. And I'm going to give you guys a few ideas today. So financial aid is a term that's used to represent all forms of financial instruments a student can use to pay for college expenses. First, I would see what grants I could qualify for. Grants are typically given based on financial need. Next, I would see what scholarships I might be eligible for. And again, scholarships are awarded to students based on a variety of factors: academic achievements, extracurricular activities, like volunteer work, and etc. The third thing I would do is I'd find out what kind of work study programs are available. So the federal work study program provides jobs for undergraduate and graduate students, allowing them to earn money to help pay for expenses related to their education. So we're going to go through all these in order a little bit. We're going to talk a little bit about each one, but only after all those three are exhausted would I look at getting a student loan. So let's go to the next slide. And so I was just checking the chat to see if somebody asked a question in there. Somebody just released a $500 scholarship. Tammy, did you made a comment about that? A $500 scholarship? What is that?
Hello, the AFT, thank you for asking. The AFT Guild is San Diego Community College District's, I believe they're their union. So every year they have a scholarship. They also have like a year program too, where they pay for your tuition to be like part of these classes. But I just know that they have a scholarship that starts right now. I believe it ends in January. It's super easy. I don't even think they have a GPA requirement, but it's really consistent. I like it. A lot of people win.
I am so glad you brought that up. That's fantastic. That's why we're on these calls. We can talk to each other and say, hey, I've got this idea, or I found out about this. And you were right. There are so many scholarships. I think I have a list of about 200 of them, actually. But we're
Yeah.
going to get to that in the next one. Like I said, the first thing I would do is start with the grants. And the most common one is the federal Pell Grant. Most of you may have heard of that one, but that's for undergraduates with financial need to help them go to school. Then there are other grants like they call it the Federal Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant. That one is for undergraduates with even a greater financial need, but it's only at participating schools. So find out what grants your school participates in. There's grants for teachers. For example, there's something called the Teach Grant, and that's for students, of course, who are going to become a teacher. So typically, a student must agree to teach in a high need field at a low income school for the first 4 years. And also, kind of read the fine print carefully on those. Failure to live up to that, like say, I don't want to work teacher anymore. Failure to agree the terms of that agreement, it could mean that the grant is converted back to a loan and you have to repay it. There's also grants based on military service. I mean, an example, there's one called the Iraq and Afghanistan Service Grant. Of course, that's for students with a parent who's passed away after the events of 9/11. So again, there's all kinds of grants out there. highly encourage you to talk with the representatives at your school and see what's out there. You might be surprised.
Excuse me,
Yes.
Natalie Blake here.
Yeah.
Could you please explain the federal supplemental educational opportunity grant one more time?
Sure. So that one is typically for undergraduates with a bigger financial need. But the school has to it has to be a participating school. So you'd have to contact the school and find out if they participate in the FSEOG grant.
Okay, thank you.
Helpful? Yeah. All right, great questions. Okay, so after applying for as many grants as you could be available, after that part, because of course the grant is free money, then I would start applying for scholarships. Now, I'll tell you, like I said, I tell you my story. I didn't know anything about scholarships when I went to high school. Never had to really have the conversation with my parents. So I didn't know anything about scholarships. I thought it was based on your grades, and boy, was I wrong. There are so many options out there. And the idea is to apply for anything and everything, but make sure that you read the fine print and of course, answer all the questions. For example, many big companies will offer scholarships just for applying. California Coast offers a scholarship for our members just for applying, and we base the approval on a lot of different factors. I mean, including spelling, grammar, just answering the questions. We approve almost everybody who applies. So don't lose points just because you typed too fast and misspelled a word. But let me give you some advice about applying for scholarships. Again, here's some kind of fun ones. Fun at the prom or um, zombie apocalypse. There was one for making a dress out of duct tape. It's just the strange, fun, silly grants. I can tell you have a list of about 200 of them. But when you're applying, let's learn how to do it. Start with the small ones. Practice with the $500,000 scholarships. Everything helps. But when most people fill out applications for scholarships, they make it just sound like they're asking for money. But be intentional. Write about what you would like to study and the work that you'll be doing in the field of your choice. Write about how you specifically plan to use your education to benefit society. That's going to go a lot further in getting you scholarships. And this is actually pretty cool. I love this. I read about a mom who had her daughter apply for one scholarship every single day of her student year. That was her homework. So instead of getting a part-time job, that was her job. Every single day, she applied for a different scholarship. She didn't get them all, but by the time she graduated, she had more money in scholarships than she'd ever need to pay for college. And by the way, as you can imagine, the skills she developed at marketing herself and writing proposals for funding, any company would jump at the chance to offer her a job. Of course, there's scholarships based on GPA, in athletics. There's also scholarships based on race, gender, religion. There's ones for foster youth. There's one for single parents. There's even ones that are state specific. And of course, don't rule out the community service scholarships as well. Here's a couple examples of some community service scholarships. Like I said, there's so many of them. So reach out. And like I said, I was shocked to learn how many they're out there. Okay. The other thing I would want you to make sure you take a look at before you start taking out loans in the future is the work study programs. So if you work on campus, you'll of course usually work for school. If you work off campus, your employer will need to be a nonprofit organization or public agency. And the work that you do must be in the public interest and relevant, of course, to your field of study. And also, the amount you earn can't exceed the work study award authorization. So for an example, when assigning your work hours, your employer will need to consider your class schedule, your academic progress. I know Cal State universities typically limit a student's work hours to a maximum of 20 hours per week when classes are in session. But what a great way to work as you go to school. Let's see. Somebody says, we would contact a counselor right away to look at scholarships and grants. Awesome. Can you help us with a list of places we should contact? Ruben, can you expand on that a little bit? What kind of places are you looking for? Ruben says, can you provide us with a list of, so here's what I'll do.
Let
Yes,
me
go ahead.
let me add my voice. My bad. Yeah, I want to add hold on, let me see. There's you said there's I didn't know about the scholarship. This all this information is news to me. So like I would like I don't know if it's possible you can help me with I use you're naming a couple. I was kind of writing it down. But other
Oh,
places
yeah.
you should contact to
Yeah,
try
you
to
know
get
what?
scholarships.
Why don't I send Sophia an email? Sophia, if I send you a link for a list
Yeah.
of scholarships, would that work? And then you can send it out?
Yeah, I can send that out. And then we also have a link for a list of city college scholarships that gives you the deadlines and what type of scholarship it is. So I'll make sure to send that to everyone as well.
Thank you,
Yes,
Sophia.
please, and grants too if you can.
Yeah, I'll send Sophia all the information I have, and then she can add to that as well.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then Tammy wrote that there's a scholarship book released every year on Amazon. That's really cool. All right. So we've exhausted it. We've talked a lot about grants, scholarships, work study. And after you've exhausted all those options and you still feel you need to borrow money for school, then you'll want to start by filling out the FAFSA. And somebody's already mentioned that. That stands for the free application for federal student aid. And unfortunately, this is where actually most people start because this is where they're told to start. But there are millions of dollars in grant money left unused every year because people don't apply or turn in the required documents. So don't be the one who misses out. And you guys can almost always find someone at the college to help you guide you through the FAFSA process. So we're not going to spend a lot of time on that today. But what I do want you to know and understand is look at number 6, appeal awards. Once you've filed for the admission, filed for financial aid, reviewed the report, of course you do the verification, and you reviewed the reward. If you feel that that is incorrect based on your particular situation, you can always appeal the results of the FAFSA. So make sure you're the one in control and you know all your options. Oh no, somebody. Okay. Sophia, give a student Aaron Kinner who's having trouble accessing it. If you can help Aaron out.
Okay.
Thanks.
Um,
All right. So let's take a few minutes to discuss the two most common types of student loans. There's federal student loans and there's private loans. So of course, federal loans are usually government loans, government backed, and of course they're set with specific terms, and payments are not usually due until 6 months after you graduate. So it usually comes with a fixed interest rate and no credit check, which is nice. Also, those loans can have repayment options at the end. They can have loan deferment, like forbearance, for example, if you lose your income, and maybe even forgiveness. And we're going to talk a little bit about those. Or you can go the private route, and sometimes there's private loans. So those are loans that are held by like a bank, for example, not by the government or a credit union. Sometimes those are better because the rates can be lower, and there's also different rules on what that money can be spent for. So let's talk a little bit about that. So once we're going to switch gears a little bit here and discuss what can be done about any existing student loans you might have. So of course, we want to know the details of the loan. We want to know your options. We want to set up a plan and stick to the plan. So what does that look like for us? Okay, so if you currently have any student loans, the best resource to log on to is the studentaid.gov. And we're going to kind of stop a little bit here. Recently, in the last few years, due to the shutdown with COVID and everything, most government loans, they've stopped requiring a payment must be made. Now, you can continue to make it, but a lot of people stop making their student loan payments. Now, that's all changing. And in fact, the student loans were due in October, was the first student loans due if you have any. Does anybody have any student loans that they have due and they have questions on? Okay, so I'm just kind of address this in generally speaking. The first thing I would do if you do have student loans right now, and even before if you don't have student loans, go to studentaid.gov and you're going to check out the different types of repayment options. Now, here's an example of 8 of them that are on there. but I want to specifically talk about two of the most popular ones. So two of the most popular ones are number 5, the income-based repayment plan. Now, this is popular because it allows you to have a very small monthly loan payment, but it can have very negative long-term effects. So let me give you an example. Almost every day, I work with people and help them understand their credit reports, help them create a budget. And what we see on their credit reports is that they owe more money on their student loan that they've taken out 10 years ago, and they've been making payments on it for 10 years, and they owe more money on that loan than when they started, and more money they even took out. So how is that possible? What do you guys think? Well, that's kind of a question for you guys out there. How is it that I took out a loan 10 years ago, I may be making payments on it, and I still owe more than I even borrowed? Go ahead and put in the chat if you think you know why. Yep, someone says interest rates, interest charges. But we're making payments on these. So lenders they're actually allowed to set the minimum payment so low that it's lower than the amount of interest that accrues this month. That's horrible. And in my opinion, that shouldn't be allowed. So as you can see, I'm working with families who are working on paying back their school debt. They said, oh, we've been paying, $20, $30 a month for my student loan, but the interest is $40 a month, and they'll never get that paid off. And they'll look back and they owe more than what they owe. So make sure you're not in that boat. Make sure, like I said, you are the one in control. Make sure you know how much that interest is costing you each month, and make sure you pay a little bit above that. And I'll also advise you, it does affect your credit. It does affect your credit score, and your credit score will go down if your loan balances continue to go up. The other thing I want to share with you is number 7, the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. This is a popular one that's out there. We're going to spend a little time talking about that. So the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program is a program that can potentially wipe out all remaining student debt if you work for a qualifying government or nonprofit employer for 10 years. Basically, what you have to do is you make your minimum payments, which is the income-based payments we talked about. You make minimum payments for 120 months or 10 years. And on that program, if you're working for this nonprofit agency or government agency, you're of course going to want to certify your employment each year as you work towards paying off the public service forgiveness program, but they can wipe out any remaining debt after 10 years. So of course you can imagine that would save you a lot of time and effort paying off loans. There is a few things I want to warn you about that. For example, though, very, very few people are actually able to see this all the way through to the end without some major life changes disrupting where they work in their life. So they usually get tripped up during the middle of it. Last I checked, less than 2% of borrowers actually were able to use this program and have their debt forgiven after the 10 years. So less than 2%. So I would not count on it, but I want you to know that's out there and you'll probably hear about it. Also, if loans were deferred during COVID, those payments don't count towards, those payments do count towards those qualifying payments. So some people have that question as well. Some people said, somebody asked a question. Can I get a student loan if I have a bad credit score? So sometimes if they're government backed, it's not going to be a credit-based decision. Private loans would typically be a credit-based decision. That's the difference between the public and the private. And Dylan, I'll just go back and answer that question for you, and I'll kind of show everybody. A lot of people might have the same question. So someone asks, can I get a student loan if my credit's not in the best shape? So again, the federal government loans, there's no credit check, but private loans probably would have a tough time qualifying for it. And then somebody asked, I missed how you can check if your employer qualifies. Krita, are you talking about the public student loan forgiveness? Yeah, you'd have to just check in with your HR department, and typically they would qualify if they're qualifying at their government or nonprofit employer. Typically they would qualify, but again, you'd want to make sure they do, and you make sure that you are certified, you certify your employment with them each year. Okay. So we talked a little bit about different repayment options, repayment strategies. How can I avoid paying all that extra money we talked about? And we talked about those high interest loans. We talked about you getting being allowed to make a minimum payment of less than the interest. Well, here's the few things you can do. Here, one trick is to pay the interest while you are in school, even though you don't typically have to. A lot of people don't. You don't have to make the payments until 6 months after you graduate. But one strategy is just pay off the interest at least while you're in school. It will also help your credit score because you'll be making payments towards that loan, and you'll save money in the long run. Another thing is be wary of the graduated repayment plans. So let's talk about that. Your reduced payment, it might not cover the amount of the monthly interest owed like we talked about. So your balance would increase. Sometimes they can say, you could pay this month for the first year, and then you can make bigger payments or lower payments as you go forward. Somebody has a question about credit. Let me get you through the slide, and then I'll answer that question for you. So of course, make more than the minimum payment. That's pretty self-explanatory, just like any credit card or any loan. The more you make on the minimum payments, the faster your student loan will be paid off. But again, student loans are typically a much lower interest rate than, say, a credit card. So let's line them up between your highest interest rates loans first, or credit card loans first, and I would pay those off. Let's see, Shayla, you had a question about credit? What's going on? Oh, your question was, what can I do to build credit? Okay. Yeah, I'll just go ahead and answer that question because a lot of people might be thinking the same thing. If you're a student and you don't have a lot of credit established or looking to establish credit, there's two things I would start with. The way you build credit is you are going to have, if you ever look at your credit report through Experian or Credit Karma, that's the two I use because they're free. They have what's called a payment calendar. If you borrow money or take out a loan or student loan or auto loan or credit card, for example, it's going to be a calendar, and you'll see a green check mark every time you make a payment, and your score will go up a couple points. Now, if you don't have any of those payment calendars created because you've never borrowed money, something you can do is you can ask a friend or a family member who has a credit card, for example, if you can be an authorized user on their credit card. What that would do, you would inherit their payment calendar. So now their payment calendar, let's say they've had a credit card for 5 years and they make their payments on time, your credit would look like you've had a credit card and you've made payments on that card for 5 years. So that's the fastest way to build your credit. Now, if that's not an option for you, if a friend or family member does not have that established or is not willing to add you as an authorized user, and by the way, you don't even have to use the card, you don't have to have one, just be an authorized user on the card. You can do what's called a secured loan. And what that is basically you're borrowing your own money, and it's just being reported to the credit bureaus to help you build a credit score. So what I always recommend is just set aside $300 from your savings account, from your checking account, lock it up in a savings account where you can't access it, and then start making loan payments towards it. $25 a month for 1 year, that equals $300. You pay yourself back the $300 by the end of the year, making $25 payments a month, and those payments get reported to your credit bureau. And that's usually the two easiest ways to get started. You won't get denied because neither of those run your credit, and so you will get approved for basically either of those, and you'll start establishing a credit score. Did I answer that question for you? Does that help? Awesome. Okay, good. Someone says, how do you qualify for low interest rate loans? Are we talking about student loans at this point? I think I'm going to see. Let's go back to the presentation on the paying for college, and then we'll answer that question at the end, I think. Okay. So we've gone on to studentaid.gov. We've looked at our payment options. We've looked at our credit. We know how much we owe. But let's say now, hey, I'm seeing I owe this amount of money and I want this out of my life. I want to pay this off faster. How can I do this? Well, if you have a positive cash flow, what that means is you earn more money than you spend each month. I would recommend paying off the student loan with the highest interest first. Now, another tool I want to leave you guys with is the powerpay.org. You can go to powerpay.org to kind of see this in action. But again, you just line up your all your payments, all your credit cards, all your car loans, student loans, personal loans, line them up from the highest interest first and start knocking out the one with the highest interest. You attack one at a time, and then that balances. Once that balance is paid up, you roll the payment to the next loan. Now, if you have a negative cash flow, that means that your cost of living is more than you're earning right now, which is actually common for students. Then you'd want to make sure you pay the loans with the smallest payment or the highest balance, the one that's eating up your cash flow, taking the most of your paycheck every month. That way, you'll have that much more money available. Does anyone have any questions about that? And one thing I will say is what we're starting to see in the last year or so is we're starting to see these buy now, pay laters. And a lot of people have these Affirm loans, these kind of things. And they kind of look great because you could say, look, I can get this thing now or 4 easy installments. But what we're realizing, what we're seeing is people have 3 or 4 or 5 of these things at, $30, $40, $50 each. And now they have $200 already spoken for out of their next few paychecks. And now they don't have the money to make their student loan payments or buy gas or buy groceries because they're stuck to these installment plans. And then their gas and groceries go on a credit card, a high interest. So please be very wary of those. I know they sound great. They sound easy. They're popular right now. But what we're seeing is they're just decimating people's cash flow and they're just completely paralyzing people's ability to repay their own loans. So if you have any questions about that, we can talk about that as well. Does anybody have any questions about that, by the way? How that works?
I have one quick question about the
Yeah.
secured loan.
Yes.
You said putting $300 into a savings account and then paying yourself $25 each month
Uh-huh.
would help build that credit.
Uh-huh.
Is that equivalent to securing a prepaid credit card for $300 and then using that to pay your bills every month? Which way would your credit score increase more, with the secured loan or the prepaid credit card?
Oh, that's
Secured card, prepaid secured credit card.
that is a great question. And I'm so glad you asked that. Okay. So I'll start this by saying you actually build your score the fastest by having both. You actually have a 10% boost in your credit score by having a loan and a line of credit. And let me explain that and tell you why. If you have a loan, let's say you have a car payment, that's a loan, and you don't make your car payment, guess what? They're going to take your car back. You're going to lose your course. Of course, you're going to make that car payment. Now, imagine you had a credit card and you go on vacation. And you come back from vacation and don't pay off that credit card. Well, they can't take your vacation back. So it's more risk for the bank. And that's actually why credit cards are so much higher interest rate than a secured loan. So again, going back to building your credit, you actually get a boost by showing that you can you handle both a loan and a line. So I would do both. If you did the authorized user on the credit card, that's a line of credit. Now, if you did the secured loan, not the secured credit card, but the secured loan, then you'll have both a line of credit payment, the credit card, and a loan payment.
Thank you.
And I'll actually expand on that a little bit more. Also, I mentioned both of those do not pull your credit. So it's not credit based, so you will get approved. You won't get denied. Now, a secured credit card, even though it's your own money, you can still get denied for that. And it pulls your credit, and it's an inquiry. So I would do the secured loan, and I would do the authorized user until my credit score is a 650. I would not apply for credit because most banks and credit unions are not allowed to lend to you unless your credit score is about a 640, 650. Sometimes they can do 620, but they get denied more often and the interest rate's higher. So I wouldn't apply for me. I would make sure, like I said, go onto your Experian or Credit Karma. Make sure you can see your credit score. Make sure it's above a 650 before you apply. And if it's not, talk to a friend and family member about authorized user and start the secured loan. Is that helpful?
Yes, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for asking that question, because a lot of people have those same questions. Somebody said, have you checked out or heard of this credit builder. That's going to be very similar. Just be a little careful on those. Make sure that they're not charging you high fees for that. Oftentimes, kind of the very high fees are hidden, and they tell you they'll, lock up $5,000 and pay, $100 a month for 3 years. There's no need to do that. So on the credit reports, all you're going to see is a check mark. That's what we mentioned. A check mark doesn't matter if you borrow $5 or $5,000. It's the same. Did you make the payment? Yes or no. So that's why I recommend just do $300, $25 a month for 1 year. Okay, these are all fantastic questions. Thank you so much. Okay, we left that last slide. Actually, let's talk about that. We left that last slide with, we talked a little bit about these popular pay now, buy later, and how it affects your ability to repay. So let's talk a little bit more. We talked a little bit more about that and why. But let's review our plan often and know where our money goes. So I'm going to highly recommend tracking your spending for a few months so that you get the awareness of your habits. So that awareness coupled with a written goal can help you see where your money's going and help you make maybe some different choices about where you spend your money. So for example, if I'm tracking all my expenses for the month and I realize I'm spending $250 a month on meals out, I can say, oh, wow, that's more than I want to spend. I can choose to reduce that to say, make a meal plan, cook at home, and maybe go out occasionally, spend $50 a month. I can use that extra $200 to pay down things like my student loans so much faster. And of course, stay on track. It's your plan. I always tell people who I work with, I don't care how you spend your money. You earned it, not me. I can provide tools and guidance, but only you can make the decisions about where your money goes. So it's your money, it's your plan. How badly do you want to stop making payments and spend the money you work so hard for on what you want? Of course, number 3, be realistic. For example, if you're not going to cut down on your meals out, for example, what can you cut down on? What would that look like for you? So remember, you have to increase your income or decrease expenses to make a bigger payment. So how are you going to choose to do that? And of course, number 4, let's practice getting to the habit of saying no so you can say yes to achieving your goals. And with that, I think is a kind of a good place to stop. We talked about we had a lot of information. I hope this was valuable time for everyone here. And if you want to reach out to me individually, again, I teach financial literacy. So again, not just about student loans. Mostly what I do is I teach how to create a budget, how to follow a budget. And we talk a little bit about investing. We talk a little bit about building your credit. Maybe you are needing to buy a car soon and you want to know kind of behind the scenes and the strategies and to prepare yourself for a major purchase like that. But anyway, there's my direct phone number, my direct email if you want to reach out or have any questions.